Welcome back to the Law of Relevancy podcast. I'm Cord Zoen, your host, and today we're joined by Jon MacDonald. He's the founder of The Good, which is a digital experience agency, and he's also a multiple-time author of books that have to do with digital experiences and buying behavior online. Jon, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me today.
Well, I'm really excited about this conversation because I was telling you before the show, I mean, this is a topic that everybody thinks they're an expert on. And most of the time when you talk to people, they'll share some sort of an anecdotal experience. And usually they're right. Of course, I mean, they have to be right because it was part of their experience. So it's true, of course. But a lot of times it's one facet, it's one piece of the overall experience that they're talking about. And what I really like in your book and in some of the things that you've talked about is you really make it more of a science. And that's important to me as a marketer because I'd like to be able to make this a repeatable process. So anyhow, I love your book, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at The Good.
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, The Good, we are a digital experience optimization firm. I've been in what would traditionally be called conversion rate optimization for over 15 years now, which is really hard to believe I started The Good that long ago. But the more that we've done to optimize conversion rates, the more we've realized that to make real lasting gains, you have to pull way further back in that customer experience than just conversion. And you mentioned this just a minute ago. That's where most people focus, right? If you go and you look online, there are tons of even just Shopify plugins or a lot of great articles and checklists about how to just get people to convert. And I think that misses the point because there are so many factors that affect conversion. And you have to understand the science behind it. You have to understand why people convert or don't convert and what's going through their head at each step of that digital journey. Because every element on your website tells the customer something about why they do or do not want to work with or buy from you. And you need to make sure that you are not just deploying tactics without understanding the psychology behind those.
So what are the foundational pieces of building a great digital experience?
Well, I break it down in the book here, Behind the Click, really into 4 different phases. And I think that that's the best way to frame the conversation here. The first is what we call discovery, right? This is the phase where customers are forming their initial impressions based on whether the company understands their problem or has a potential to do so, right? Has a potential solution for them. The second phase is information gathering. This is the point of the digital journey where customers move beyond thinking, this might be what I'm looking for, to really starting to dig into the details, right? They're moving beyond that kind of what we would call window shopping phase and starting to dedicated mission to find that information they need to make a purchasing decision, right? Third is decision-making and conversions. Now, this is where people put all of the effort typically, right? Once the customers have gathered the information they need, it's time for them to make a decision. And companies generally insist that visitors browsing fall in love with their company, but that's really missing the point at this stage, right? They have a specific reason that consumers are there. And we want to make sure that that has been addressed before those folks get to the point of conversion. Okay. And then last is post-purchase. This is what happens after checkout. And really, I'm under the belief that conversions don't stop at checkout. That digital experience has to follow all the way through, which means long after that product or service has been delivered. And this is what can either validate that choice or trigger regret in the eyes of the consumer.
I mean, I think what you're talking about is you're speaking to a very holistic approach when you're rolling out a service or a product online, and it's probably not something you're going to just shoot from the hip and get right, I assume.
Right.
Even if you have good intuition, it's a very deliberate process to map all this out. the before, during, and then after the sale.
Right.
How much should
That's
a company,
very true.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but how much should a company invest as far as money and time to do something like this?
Well, by nature of optimization, you're never done, right? You should always be optimizing. And we have team t-shirts that we've put out that is just get 1% better every day.
Yeah.
That's really the goal, right? The goal should be to optimize your site and just find those small tweaks that are going to make it a better digital experience and better digital journey for your consumers. And if you do that, you'll have a compounding effect. Now, how quickly can you do that? Well, the reality is that you can make some initial changes that have a big impact, but you're never going to be done optimizing. And in terms of the budget, there's a lot of folks out there, we'll call them like Twitter bros, right? Out there who really are pushing these checklists out. And they're saying, you can optimize your site for a couple $1,000s and just do this checklist that I'll give you. The problem is that folks who do that don't have a good understanding of why. There are a ton of tactics out there. And that was really why I wanted to write Behind the Click, because they're understanding the tactics is very different from completing the tactics. If you just look at it as a checklist, and you can complete that checklist for fairly inexpensive these days. Front-end development is essentially a commodity, right? But if you don't understand why you're making those changes, they're never going to be effective. And if you don't understand what your particular customers are looking to accomplish, then you probably are going to end up leading them down the wrong path with that checklist. So in terms of timing, I don't think you're ever done optimizing. In terms of budget, you really need to have a baked in budget for this. And if you can't make the budget to optimize, then you're probably not ready to optimize, meaning you need to be of a certain size. And this is another issue that I've seen come up a lot recently is e-commerce brands, especially that are, maybe doing only a couple million a year, are saying, well, I want to optimize for conversion. The problem is they don't really have the budget. They don't have the traffic, which means they can't get the necessary data. And they don't have the number of conversions that are necessary yet. Now we're on that growth path. That's great. Maybe you can make some, we'll call them best practice changes. I like to say best practices are for beginners, right? You want to get past that phase. You really need to scale up to a point where you can get statistically relevant data and have enough of that data to truly understand what's going through the minds of your consumers.
You mentioned the websites a lot, and then you also mentioned, the Twitter bros. It reminded me that, it's not just an organization's website, but it's every channel that they're on, with across social media. So how do you work within all of that ecosystem to understand the best way to have these more enhanced experiences?
Well, the first thing that we often look at is what's the journey that a consumer takes to get to the site, right? So when they get to the site, they already have some type of idea that you can solve their pain or need, because there's only two reasons consumers are at your site. Nobody listening to this podcast is Facebook. Nobody's going to your site just to hang out and kill time, right? They are at your site because they have a pain or a need, and something led them to believe that your product or service can solve that pain or need. And then if they determine that's the case, they want to convert as quickly and easily as possible. So the reality is that your desire to have people convert is aligned with the visitor's desire to convert as well, because they want to solve their pain or need and move on with their lives.
Right.
So the easier you can make that journey, the better everybody wins. But it all starts with how people are getting to your site. And that means if you make a promise in an ad or leave some type of hint that you can solve a pain or need based on a search that they did, an ad that they saw, even a recommendation from a friend, a referral, right? Maybe they saw an influencer. Now, all of those threads that were started in that traffic generation tactic need to be closed when they get to the site. Meaning, if you told them that your product is going to keep them dry while they're camping, then you need to be addressing that same problem on the landing page that they end up at on your site. That is the best way you can really see that through. And if you don't know what people are coming to your site thinking, then you really need to do some research there and user testing and talking to consumers is going to be the best way to do that.
You were talking about solving problems and pain points, and I think that there's a trap of using negative language on a website versus positive language. And all the research that I've seen is a lot of times it's the positive approach to solving the problem that works more effectively. So how do you take a positive approach just to expressing some of these negative solutions?
Well, it's interesting because I think you bring up a good point that a lot of companies do something that I like to call negative intent shaming. And it all kind of goes into the psychology of how a consumer, what kind of mind space are they in when they're at your site, right? So, for instance, when they first get to your site and they're in that discovery phase, they're asking a couple of questions. They're asking, does this company understand my problem? And does this company have a solution to my problem? Right? And imagine if you throw a pop-up in their face and you say something like, in order to be able to close that pop-up, no, I don't like discounts. And that's the only way to close the pop-up, right? I now have a negative feeling, a negative association with your website and your brand. And that immediately is crafting a horrible first impression, and it anchors the entire digital journey to follow. So if you start people on that negative intent right away, they are going to have that negative association throughout the rest of their journey. And there's really no way to change that over, right? And this is psychology. This is really just baked in that we have this anchoring effect. And really it's called anchoring bias is what it's called. And it's the idea that people overly rely on that first piece of information they encounter. So you really need to make sure that you are anchoring them in a positive, not in a negative. And even then, they end up having another bias, which is called confirmation bias, which is the tendency to give more weight to information that aligns with pre-existing beliefs. So if you had somebody come to your site based on an ad that had negative intent, and then you got them to your site, they already have that negative intent in their head. And then they've been anchored before they even get to your site, and you're just confirming it at that point, right? So there's really no positive outcome here.
Let's talk to an example
if you go that negative
that. Can you give us an example of what you mean by that? Because I think that that's really important, because the ads are reaching potentially millions and millions of people.
Yeah.
So what would it look like when it's an ad that is based on negative intent? So
there's a great example of two different types of ads out there where, Porsche did a really cool ad where, and this is years ago now, where they won the Le Mans race, 10 times in a row. Okay. And the 11th time they actually lost it and they came in second. And the ad they ran was an ad that said, nobody's perfect. So now they were, instead of attacking the other company that won that 11th time, they blamed it on themselves. They said, hey, nobody's perfect. But what they did is they showed 11 items in the list and the ad, and it said, first place, first place, first place, first place. And then the 11th said second place. right? They turned what could have been potentially a negative into a positive by saying, hey, nobody's perfect, but look, 10 out of 11 is not bad, right? Who do you want to be with? The one that won it once or the one that won it 10 times? Yeah. So I think that's a really good example of how to turn something that could potentially be a negative into a positive whenever you have the opportunities to do so.
Can you think of any, on the flip side, can you think of any ad examples where people did it exactly wrong?
Yeah, I think that there's a really common issue that I see a lot right now. And I think this has to do with the economy in the United States in general, where e-commerce margins are so slim right now that a lot of brands are feeling, they're feeling a lot of pressure especially from competition. And one of the easy ways, I almost look at it as too easy, and it shouldn't be done because it's this easy, is to attack the competitor, right? So what, is happening is they're saying, oh, so-and-so copied this from us, right? And I don't want to name any brand specifically because I don't want to cause any issues here, but I would say that there are brands out there that are saying, hey, look, we have a great product and Target copied our product. We must have a really good product. But then the consumer is like, oh, I guess I should go see how much that copycat product is at Target. I'll just go buy it there. And I know if I don't like it, I can easily return it. There's Targets everywhere.
Right.
You can probably go pick it up same day. So instead of turning a negative into a positive, they basically just continue digging their own hole by introducing the consumer to an alternative that they may not have already known was there. Or if they did, and that consumer was looking for a better quality product, they're going to find you. You need to make sure it's easy to find you. But if they were very price conscious and had all these other reasons why, they're just going to buy the cheap version at Target anyways, right? So don't make a negative even more negative.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, one of the things that you've kind of touched on there about making it easy to find you is multi-channel campaigns. A lot of times brands and products, they'll put all of their eggs in one basket. They'll just do search. They'll just do social. And they're not building the same amount of trust as they could have if they were doing retargeting ads, if they were showing up in search also, Google Shopping, all the different other places too. And so they don't get the additive effect of, wow, this must be a really legit brand because they're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely need to be everywhere. And there's even psychology behind this because there's mainly two types of shoppers on your e-commerce site. And this works for B2B as well. In fact, I say it's even more prevalent if you have a SaaS product or you're in B2B. But there's two main types of groups of folks. The first is maximizers. And these are people who need to know every available option to them in order to make the best decision. They've got 100 browser tabs open. They're clicking on everything. They're comparing, contrasting. They want every single detail, right? And then there's the satisfiers. These folks are consumers who are content to just find the first good solution that comes to them, and they don't need to continue their search, right? So I found that product at Target. It's good enough. I'm just going to get it and move on with my life. It's not that consequential to everything else I have going on. I need to make it happen. But if I'm buying a higher quality product or something I'm going to want to keep for a while, maybe a higher price point, I'm going to do some more research. And you need to understand that people are coming to your site with this already baked in. This psychology is already there. They are predetermined before they even started looking for your product, service, etc., whether they're a maximizer or a satisfier. And it's one or the other. And the key here is to be everywhere for the maximizers so they can find you. But also on the satisfier side, if they don't find you quickly, they're not going to buy because they're going to, whoever's they type in the search and whoever pops up first that looks reputable, they're probably going to buy. Maybe you get one or two clicks out of them, right? But they're solving a pain and they want to get on with their life as quickly and easily as possible. And they have 25 things on that checklist they're trying to go through and just knock out. And you're only one of those items. So carrying this through to the actual website itself, you need to have all this information available for the maximizers, but you can't make it so overwhelming that the satisfiers really feel like, well, this is too much. I'm going to just go to where's the next easy stop, right? You want to keep it easy.
Got it. In your book, you talk a lot about heuristics.
Mm-hmm.
What are heuristics and how are they included in this conversation?
Well, heuristics is the easiest way to describe this is that we make 35,000 decisions every single day. Some are big, like deciding to quit a job. Some are small, like choosing the outfit you're going to wear for the day, right? And some are so small that your brain just makes the decision without you even realizing that it's being done. I'm, driving to work every day and I know the way and I don't have to really think about it very much, right? You kind of can zone out a little bit. Well, our brains take these shortcuts to make those decisions as quickly and easily as possible. And that is what is called heuristics. Okay. And it's great because if we had to consciously choose every single decision every day, we would never get out of bed. We would just be exhausted. We would be overwhelmed. It just wouldn't happen. Okay? But it can be bad because what happens is our brain is searching for the easiest choice, not necessarily the most logical choice. So you need, as a brand, as a company, you need to understand some of those heuristics and create experiences that work with the way your customers' brains work so that it's easy and simple to make a decision that's best for them, right? Or you can eliminate obstacles that you don't realize are keeping customers from seeing that right choice. So that's really why heuristics is extremely important to understand.
Yeah, just to kind of pivot on some of that right there. One of the, I know you don't like using tactics necessarily, but one of the things that you hear a lot about is social proof. And social proof really lowers a lot of risk as long as you have it. It can help people really kind of like grease the skids to get people to move through the funnel more quickly because a lot of other people are doing the same thing. Is there a place for that strategy within some of the stuff that you teach?
Oh, without question, especially in that decision-making and conversions phase, because consumers are asking a handful of questions at each of these phases. And at this phase, they're often asking things like, what's in it for me? If I'm wrong about this choice, what's the worst possible outcome? Right? They're asking things like, if I make this decision, what does it say about me? Right? Is it something where I'm going to tell the world that I made this decision? Or is it something where I probably shouldn't say anything? Right? So I think, the key here is to really be able to use social proof to increase awareness, which is great, and help people to understand what pain or need is being resolved by your product. Okay. So showing the influencers or social proof that are addressing a concern or an objection and knocking that out through that social proof, that's when it becomes super effective. And then there's also a psychological factor where if there's a couple ways to deploy this, but it's called the IKEA effect. Okay. And the IKEA effect is that people feel more attracted and attached to items that they've created themselves. So part of that, in a way that a brand can utilize this, is to get people to leave reviews. Okay. Now, I know a lot of brands are like, yeah, that's great. I asked for reviews. I sent an email out after the purchase, etc. The reality is you need to go much, much deeper than that and make it a whole part of your post-purchase process. And the idea behind this is that, and the research is there, and I mentioned all the reports and everything in the book that I found, but the reality is that as a consumer, if I make a purchase and maybe I feel either neutral or positive about that purchase, even if I feel slightly negative about that purchase, and I leave a review, okay, immediately I feel more positive. Whether I already feel positive, I feel neutral, or I feel slightly negative, it ticks me up towards the positive. Okay. Because I have now contributed something. Now, as a brand, if I leave a negative review and the brand responds in a helpful and positive manner, hey, we hear your concern. We want to make it right. We're reaching out to you, or call this phone number. Here's an email address you can contact. Or I just had this issue with we ended up with a really nice toaster, and of all things that don't really need a touch screen, et cetera, toaster's probably one of them, right? But I had this really cool toaster. And I don't even know how I ended up with it, quite honestly, whether it was a gift or what, but it's like a $300 toaster, right?
And Wi-Fi hotspot.
Right. I mean, it's like does all, and it literally has a touch screen. There's no like dial to push down. It's like, oh, I want to toast a bagel and I want it this, toast level, and then hit start. And it would start toasting, and then you'd hear an audible click and it would just turn off. And it was the most annoying thing, to the point where one morning, my wife and I got in an argument about it. She's like, I hate this toaster. I'm just going to throw it away. And I thought, okay, like, I get it. It's frustrating. So I emailed the CEO and I said, hey, I get you're a small company. I own a small company as well. Love your product. But, my wife really kind of wants to throw this in the garbage. And I don't want to go back to the dark ages of toast. Right. So how can we work together to solve this? Like, what do you need so that we can get a toaster that works?
Yeah, it's like the toast summit.
Right. He wrote me back like 15 minutes later and was like, I don't want anyone to have to go back to the dark ages of toasting. I connecting you. Here's so-and-so on my customer service team. They're going to mail you a new toaster. Can you please give them, they're going to ask you some questions, respond quickly. We'll get you a new toaster out right away. And it was the best possible thing that could have happened, because here I am having turned an argument with my wife about a toaster oven that's supposed to be helpful, right? And it's like this high-end toaster into a positive, because I was able to go to her at dinner that night and be like, yeah, I know we were frustrated about that toaster. Good news, the CEO is just going to send us a new one. And she was like, oh, great. That's cool. All right. So it was a win-win for everybody, including her, right? Who probably would have went and told all her friends, like, man, if something comes up that looks like it could be technologically improved, but it works just fine as it was, don't buy that thing.
Yeah, we call that a toast roast.
Yeah.
And now it's the toast with the most. So
love it. Yeah. I'll tell you what, it was it was such a positive feeling to get that back. And now I'm telling the story here.
Yeah.
Right. So, again, another positive came out.
I think that CEO would like you to mention the brand and his great customer service. At this point.
Happy to. Revolution Toasting. I think it's called the Revolution Toaster. I don't know. Look it up. Williams Sonoma or somebody like that sells it. One of the high-end like kitchen retailer things. But if you want to spend $350 toasting your bread and bagels, have at it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned SaaS products earlier, and to me, these seem like some of the products that have the most to gain with working with an agency like you, because of the recurring revenue. And it's not just, it's just not that cost to get that customer once. I mean, you're getting a long-term relationship with somebody, and it's an extremely valuable type of a relationship. What are some other types of products or services that have a lot to gain from this experiential deep dive?
Well, you can imagine over 15 years, we've worked with all different types of brands. A couple of really good case studies and stories have been privileged enough to be able to talk about. A lot of customers, you can imagine, don't like us talking about what we do for them because they don't want their competitors to hear. But we do a lot of work with Adobe, and we work especially with the Acrobat team, or Document Cloud is what they call themselves internally. But with Acrobat, there is a lot of work that goes into converting somebody who is a trial download into a recurring revenue customer. So Adobe sells all their software on a subscription basis now, right? And they also offer free trials of all of those. And what we did is we came in and we did a lot of research on what are the tactics that people use in the tool. What specifically are they using Acrobat for? And out of that cohort, how many convert into paying recurring customers? So we're looking at all of this data in this manner. We were able to understand that if we influence people taking a couple of these different steps in the trial while they're a trial customer, they will at a higher rate convert into a recurring customer. So this is almost every SaaS tool is going to have data on how people are engaging with their tool. And what you need to do is convert that data into user testing and actually talking to consumers about those particular tasks that they were trying to accomplish. There's a Clayton Christensen and the whole jobs to be done. He was a professor, I believe, at Harvard, and he had a whole lecture and a theory around what's called jobs to be done, that consumers don't just pay for something. They're hiring everything they do to complete a job for them. Whether you're buying a milkshake at McDonald's to, fill you up for the day versus just have a sweet treat, or, whether you're downloading Acrobat to complete a school form for your child, and then, what do you want to do next with that form, right? And having a good understanding of that you're hiring this to do a job for you.
Yeah, I was in a meeting the other day, and somebody brought up this exact example where McDonald's was able to sell more milkshakes by asking a big focus group, what job is that milkshake doing for you? And it was a really interesting and groundbreaking way of learning about the benefits that milkshake was providing. And it ended up leading to them even selling that milkshake as a breakfast item as well.
Right. Exactly. Because people were buying it as a way to stay full longer throughout the day until they got through lunch, etc. And they hadn't thought about it that way, right? Another good example that you wouldn't really think about with optimizing Journey is paywalls in publications. So we've done a lot of work with like The Economist, and where if you go to The Economist and you view a couple articles, pretty standard for publications these days, you're going to hit a paywall. But what does that whole experience look like? Why are people subscribing or not subscribing? And how can you incentivize that behavior? How can you understand what job they're trying to get done so that you can work with that? And, at the same time, can you incorporate things like loss aversion, right? What are they losing if they can't read this article, right? Or how do you get over things like decision fatigue, right? Because by the time you are reading an article, right, a lot of times you're trying to learn something. So you're already in an enhanced mental state where you might be a little more tired, or you're trying to detach from something, meaning you're taking a break from your workday and you're going to check out the news or read an article to maybe not, give your brain a break to some degree, right? So you really have to understand what type of publication is solving what problems, and how do I reduce that decision fatigue? Because the more decisions we make in a day, the more mentally drained we feel, and the worse decisions we're going to make because of that.
Well, Jon, I really appreciate you coming on the show. You've got a lot of great insights. I like how you've taught us you don't have to jump through hoops to sell more Acrobat licenses. You just have to follow some very well outlined processes there in your book.
Look, here's the reality. If you are trying to trick your website visitors, you're doing it completely wrong, right? Work with them. As I said earlier, your brand and the consumer, you're actually aligned. You both want that person to convert and get on with their lives. And if you can help that process and make that as easy as possible, then everybody wins.
That's fantastic. Well, we're going to read more about this in your book. Where else can they follow you, Jon?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So just look me up and connect with me on LinkedIn. But also, if you want a copy of Behind the Click, I'm happy to give 50% off digital copy. If you go to thegood.com/BTC for Behind the Click and use code BTC podcast 50. So BTC podcast 50. And if you do that, you get 50% off a digital copy, because I feel like, our mission at The Good is to remove all of the bad online experiences until only the good remain. And this book, it's a big reason I wrote this book, because I want people to understand how to create digital experiences that engage and delight and convert as well. And the best way to do that is to spread the word. So,
well, thanks for making it easy for us, Jon. It's definitely not an easy thing to do. And you can follow us anywhere where podcasts are found, on the lawofrelevancy.com, and also on our social media feed at Bake More Pies. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next time.